the best thing is it felt like a black hole. I remember crying on the way to the first appointment, and I said, Max, nothing looks the same. Like, I have my dog, I have you, I have this baby, my parents are here. I can't find familiar. And I was like, I want out. Nothing felt good. I needed something that reminded me of Sara. That feeling was so omnipresent, and I'd sit at night breastfeeding and just cry, and I'd just sit there and I'd Google. It was like everything dark and deep.
Being a mom is the toughest job there is, and it doesn't come with instructions. So it's okay if you don't have all the answers. We'll figure it out together. This is Mom Brain with Ilaria Baldwin and Daphne Oz.
I am Sara Haines from Strahan and Sara on ABC at 1 p.m.
Every time I'm like, maybe 4 sounds good, maybe whatever. I meet a family with 5 or I meet a family with 6. And we spend a lot of time in Florida now. And I do feel it's a little bit like the fishbowl situation where the bigger the bowl gets, you grow into your space kind of. Where in New York, people looked at me like I had 3 heads with 2 kids. You know, it was.
Yeah.
And now being in Florida, I feel like my register of what's normal is expanding a little bit. So I don't know.
I got a shop for smaller houses.
So wait, so is it you or your husband who's pushing for all these babies?
Well, I always thought I'm one of 4, and I now you're one of 4, Daphne,
I'm one of 4.
and you're
One of 2.
okay. Because to me, a lot of when you plan in your mind, which is so funny, what your family's gonna look like. I always gauge it on where you come from, like what you liked. So I always thought 4, 4, 4, and every year I got older and didn't meet a husband or even a sperm donor. I was like, I need to really.
3.
These eggs are aging with me. So as I looked at that, the number started creeping down. 2 always felt too small because not that that's not a beautiful, perfect family for some, but siblings were the best part of my life.
Amazing.
So I feel like I wanted to give each of them a couple to pick from in case they're hating on one day. They need at least 2 siblings.
They can team up
They
now.
can team up.
Oh, you want a Lord of the Fly situation happening in the
we
Haines
know they're
household.
going to pack. I'm all about dogs. So I was like, this is going to happen. I think the problem is I don't think I'll be my best self for 4. So 3 was the number Max always wanted. 3 was better. Like I needed more than 2, but 4 sounded like a lot. So I'm always like, I think 3 is what I can handle.
Yeah.
You know what, though? I feel like I never planned for 4. Although the 4th one was the only one that we tried for. But it was like,
Wait.
Okay.
What?
Yeah.
You tried for the 4th one?
Yeah, I was like, what happens? We've never tried before. What happens when you try? Want to know what happens?
You nail it.
You get pregnant.
Same thing as when Alec and Ilaria don't try.
I was going to say, you know what happens? The same thing. Weird.
It's still so fun though, so we just do it.
I also thought, because I have a girl and now I have 3 boys, but I had a girl, then I had 2 boys, and I was like, so naturally I have a girl
Right, the
again because
universe
that's my pattern.
Yes.
Girl, boy, girl, right?
Right.
No.
This
No,
isn't
I have a boy.
Mastermind. You don't get to pick the order of the
Exactly.
pegs.
But it's weird how it is totally true how what you grow up with colors, and it can go both ways. You can either need to have a giant family like what we grew up with, or you can be like, that was kind of nuts. We're going to shrink this baby down. For me, it was always holidays. It was this idea that gathering the family around the table. First of all, I don't know how to cook for less than 20 people. Fewer, grandmother, English major grandmother, fewer than 20 people. But I also, I just, that like celebratory moment of just getting that many mouths and that many friends and crazy people and the conversations and the party that always happens and flows from there was always really, really important to me. But I do think that it's interesting. You said, I don't know that I'll be my best self for a 4th because let's face it, Sara Haines has an enormously full plate. And I think it's really responsible to think about, like, how can I make how can I make time in this life for the things that I need to do and the things that I love to do, and make sure that I still have plenty of time left, plenty of me left over for my family and for myself. I think those are like, oftentimes, we just cram it in because you have to kind of situation. And I think it's really thoughtful to just consider that for a second.
Thank you. I've dealt with anxiety and depression over time. So I think I look at my mom sometimes, and I think she tried to work. She was a nurse. I don't remember the years she worked and didn't work, but I look back and I think she yelled a lot. And I think if she could go back, she might have found she was spread pretty thin.
Yeah.
Her and my dad have a traditional relationship where my dad brought home the bacon. He was a loving father, but my mom did every lesson we went to. She worked extra to pay for those lessons.
Wow.
Like, she wanted to make sure we had everything we could have. and she drove us to everything. It wasn't really as shared as it is. Like, I know your husbands participate. Like, my dad was more of that generation.
Totally.
He didn't do a lot of it.
I'm not so sure that my husband falls in that category.
I
He's
don't actually
kinda
know
old
Alex,
school.
so I just grouped him in by like.
I know, I love that. I'm sure he'll like that too. I would like to know
That
when
was for
he
you, Alex.
feeds, bathes, changes. Never.
But I mean, I feel like there is a mentality to that. I had a little postpartum after my first, so Max had to like sink or swim.
Yeah.
Like, our child needed him because mommy wasn't there. So Max not only came in thinking, I really can't wait to be a dad, because he was closer with his dad than his mom, but he had to. And so I think the division of labor is super, we have strengths in different lanes. So he's great. But I just think if I had more and wanted a career, and I don't remember my mom sitting down with me and asking me along the way how I felt about things. Like, they kept me fed and clothed. I want to know my kids, and I know where my limits are, and I don't want to be screaming when I'm mad. Like, I want to know my kind of boundaries.
I don't want to be spread within that. Yeah. No, I mean, as Daphne said, that's responsible, and it's probably one of the things that your children will look back as they get older and really appreciate about you. Now, because you had such an intense experience the first time around, was it scary to think about having another child? And you had them very close together.
Yeah. I have to say the worst time in my life was right after Alec. I think that whole becoming a parent and thinking, I thought my whole life I wanted to do this, which I now realize might be the postpartum speaking.
Right.
But even when you reflect, you can't remember it differently. So when I think of Alec, I think of a very dark time. And I just knew I didn't want an only child for no other reason than my favorite people are my siblings. So I knew I had to go back in. I also knew I was not a spring chicken, and my husband is. So I married younger.
Good for you.
Yeah, I was like, one of us has to carry the youth vote.
So did Daphne. You married younger, too.
6
She's
months
"Hey,
younger.
bye."
He put you up to that. Oh my gosh.
6 months.
Unbelievable.
Max is like 5.5 years. So I was like, you're the young one.
Yeah.
But we went back thinking I knew I wanted at least 2. And if I wanted the option for 3, we had to keep going.
It's you had a very similar experience going back to work pretty quickly after your first, as I did. I remember going back to the CHU after Philomena was born and feeling like I didn't have it diagnosed, but I feel like I had anxiety after Nika, my third. But after the first 2, I guess because honestly it wasn't as discussed at the time, it just felt like exhaustion, hormones, like craziness. I felt totally out of my body, but I don't remember it feeling as heightened, and my awareness of it being like with Nika, where I was just rationally, I was like, everything's great. Why am I so low? Why am I so tired? Why am I so upset? Why am I crying all the time? Like, and I will just say, one day of a huge dose of probiotics like rebooted my whole system. Like and that's a whole other story about how I think, because I'd had a lot of antibiotics in the hospital when I was giving birth to her. And I think it just wiped out my gut flora. And we know so much of your mood and your health and your happiness starts in your gut. And I had this like huge dose of probiotics, and all of a sudden it was like my whole mood changed. Right. Anyway, just a little tidbit for people who might find that helpful. But with Philomena, I remember going back to the CHU and feeling like I was supposed to be I was supposed to be happy and chipper and like cheery and bantering people and using knives and cooking with fire. And I was supposed to be an expert in being a mother. And I did not feel like a fucking expert. I felt crazy. And I wonder what your experience was like dealing with the depression and dealing with it being your first and dealing with all of the chaos that comes with being a new mom and also going back to work in a very, high pressure and public environment. What was that like for you?
Well, almost every feeling people told me I'd feel, it was the opposite. So I didn't feel like a mom. When I had the baby, I thought you'd feel things. People say, your instinct will kick in. You'll know what to do. It's your baby. No one knows your baby like you. I'm like, this kid's fucked. Like, I don't know him at all. I just met him. And people said, you're going to cry when you go back to work. I was thrilled when I went back to work. It was the first time I felt myself again, because I actually felt more of an expert at work than I ever did at home. And I remember dreading coming home from work because I didn't feel the same connection to Alec as I definitely did to Sandra, which I now realize was part of the postpartum.
Yeah.
That I wanted to squeeze him and cuddle him, but then I was like, oh, we're stuck here again. Like, we're here and there's no sleep, and we're, like, it's this dark hole that was so hopeless that I thought, this is the rest of our lives. Like, this is what parenting is, and it's not what I thought. And I was so caught on an answer of what I thought life was going to be that I never questioned why people wouldn't do it, and I'm not good at this. You can't turn back. I'm also, what are you going to do? Give the kid away?
Yeah,
like,
no, you can't do that.
Yeah, and I was like,
Right.
what? I never had bad feelings towards him, which was also a sign I was looking for with postpartum. And because I never felt negative to him, I didn't see it as postpartum.
Right.
And that's how it crept in.
How did you seek help? How did you figure it out?
Well, I had a little bit of dabbling in depression. The New York Times came out with an article right when I was pregnant with him. And Joy Behar, I remember one day, was coming on the set and she's like, Sarah, did you see the New York Times article that they're now starting to diagnose depression during pregnancy? People always focused postpartum.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's amazing, because anything with mental health, having been someone that's very open about therapy and medications, and like, I'm all on board. I thought I was looking for certain things, and then I wanting to hurt the child, not feeling connected. I still love, he was such a little squish. Like, that was automatic. I wanted to kiss him and smell him. And so those are normal feelings. I felt so, the best thing is it felt like a black hole. Every interaction with humans, I felt like I was in an echo chamber where I remember crying on the way to the first appointment. And I said, Max, nothing looks the same. Like, I have my dog, I have you, I have this baby, my parents are here. I can't find familiar. I don't know what it looks like anymore. And he was like, you're fine. Like, this is got to be hormones. And that feeling didn't dip. It just stayed there. And I was like, I want out. Like, I need to leave. I'm taking Trixie. Like, I knew I was really good dog mama. I was like, Trixie and I are leaving, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but I can't be here, and I can't tell people. I don't want the public to know I'm abandoning my family, but I'm going to leave you, and I'm leaving with the dog. And he was like, calm down. And I was like, Max, I don't know what else to do. Like, I can't be here. And it was like every day fighting, I have to leave. Like,
but leave to do what? To like
to
find
get out.
center again, or just to like
no, go. Like, anything away from this very dark place. Thank you. That felt like it was never going to end. And I was like, I want the kid to be all right. I want you to be all right. I love you. It's not about our marriage. I didn't know this is what it felt like, and I can't do this. Like, this is awful. Nothing felt good. And everyone's trying to talk to you and stuff. And I just remember literally feeling like in the movies where those scenes happen, where you can hear like an echo. People are talking to you.
It's
and
muffled. But
muffled. You're just looking around and nothing, you don't like anything around you. Nothing looks like you remember it. And the only time I felt good was at work. And I thought, that can't be normal. Yeah. Like, everyone said the first day you leave, get ready, you'll cry when you leave the baby. I couldn't have gotten out that door fast enough because I just needed familiar.
Yeah.
I needed something that reminded me of Sarah. Not this mom title that was so massive I hadn't earned it. Not, being in the house and breastfeeding, which I was struggling with. None of that. I just needed to get out. And that feeling was so omnipresent. It was like 24/7, and I'd sit at night breastfeeding and just cry, and I'd just sit there and I'd Google, what do you do if you make a mistake and you have a baby? Like, the Google history gave me away. It was like everything dark and deep.
Well, because you're alone, and it's the middle of the night or early morning, and you go to a dark. You just go, and you're in your worst cycle of what is all of this saying about me and about my future as a mother.
Yeah.
How did Max cope with that, and how was he able to help you out of it? Because I definitely just relied much more than I thought I would on John as my like live-in therapist for months after I had our first, and just feeling like every night he'd have to come home and just get me out of whatever rut I'd sunken myself into that night about worrying. And you worry about, in retrospect, you worry about things that are either unimportant or not nearly as important as you thought they were. And a lot of it for me had to do with expectations around what I thought motherhood was going to look like, or what I thought my experience of motherhood would be, that had no bearing on reality. I feel like before you become a parent, motherhood is about you. And then you become a parent and motherhood becomes about the kid. And that forces you to have a real shift of reference and a real shift of practice. Like it has, again, like you said, you had friends who, because it's the nice thing to say, and because for a lot of people it's the true thing to say, the first day you leave, you'll cry, and every minute is bliss, and it goes so fast. And these are true things that you now probably tell new moms because it's what we remember about that phase. But I feel like it set me up for some really reality was very different from what I'd been told to expect. And I'm always really in awe of how my husband figured out how to help draw me out of that, because depression is such a weird, tricky, oftentimes chemical, but very deeply emotionally rooted thing that's hard to have someone help you with. So I'm always curious to like what was most helpful that he was able to do for you.
Well, he met me in our relationship. I had always struggled a bit with anxiety and going to therapists, and at different times had been on medications to help me with that. So Max was already sensitive, but I think he saw the flare up that I wasn't quite identifying as depression. Although I'd always thought I was so educated in mental health and I'll know it because I know what to look for. And this caught both of us off guard because it was more like I was an imposter in a life that I didn't want anymore. But the day it really hit me, and Max knew something was wrong. He didn't know what to do at first. So he just kind of was like, tell me what you need. Just tell me what you need and I'll do it. But I remember I was breastfeeding Alec and my dog Trixie came in. I was very close with my dogs. One passed right before Alec and one passed right after Sandra.
Wow.
So I lost, they were 15 and 16 years old. So I'm sitting there breastfeeding Alec and Trixie walks in and she's a fully trained dog, never has accidents, and she just pees on the white carpet that we had in Alec's room. And in that moment, and this is where the anxiety came in, it almost flared as like an OCD. I took Alec off of me and he was days old, little. And I set him on the ground and Max had heard me, I had said, I need help. And he comes in and the baby's on the floor and I'm scrubbing the pee. And I could see the juxtaposition of, I was really off on my priorities, but I had to release the nipple. I'm tearing my child off my breath and I'm scrubbing and I'm so stressed about the dog and is she okay and what's happening with the pee. And Max is like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And we both saw the crazy in the moment. This was not right, but I couldn't stop it. And I said, something's wrong. You got to help me. And that was the pinnacle moment where he's like, who do we call? What do we do? I was like, I'm embarrassed. I'm not calling anyone. He's like, you got to do something now. You cannot be breaking a breastfeeding session to go clean up your chihuahua's pee. And I was like, it seemed really important at the moment.
But you know what? That's amazing and it's probably because you had such a history with this and sought help and realized that it's okay to seek help, that so many people don't get that sign.
Yeah.
They don't see that there's something wrong. That's the moment. When you have a problem, you're already in such a better place once you can see that you have a problem.
Yes.
And then be willing to go and seek help. And it sounds like you have an amazing partner who's there to do it with you and not just, come in there and be like, what are you doing? And kind of yell at you about it. What did you do? I've two. I've got a million questions as I'm hearing you speak. But two things that I'm really, really interested in is, what's your advice to people who are experiencing the same thing? Because it is so common, and people are speaking about it more and more. And we talked about how we feel like it's very important to talk about these things that people are embarrassed to talk about. So what's that's number one. And then I want to know, since you're going on to having two more, what do you do differently to prevent that from happening? Because I know some of my friends who had postpartum, they're like, I'm just never doing it again.
Yeah. To make sure I get the meat of this question, you have to go see a medical professional, a therapist, not a minister, not a family member, not your best friend. This is a medical condition and it needs medical oversight, which means you will feel better, by the way, telling a stranger, I want to leave my family, than you will. Trust me, the embarrassment comes with the personal connection. I had to go. I had therapists before, but I specifically was seeing the OCD flare up, which I had never been officially diagnosed with. It was more of a cute habit. My parents had always said, she hangs her hangers, an inch apart. Isn't it cute? She's so tidy. And, I never counted or did any
You were
washing.
Marie Kondo before.
I was so Marie Kondo that they were like, it's veiled in so much perfection. Why touch it? So, but it flared up to a point I had to refold all of Alex's thing. I could see it happening, and I was like, I think this is OCD. So I went.
But that makes sense because you're trying to put control back on a universe that feels totally out of sync with what you've ever known about yourself. Like it just. I find it actually more amazing if you've never had any kind of postpartum depression or anxiety than if you've had it, because it just feels like you're sleep deprived, you're exhausted, your reality is completely changed. Someone is completely dependent on you. You are no longer an independent version. You're not even the same version of yourself that you were a day ago.
Right.
Like it just. Of course, you should feel some sense of what the hell is going on here.
But then that's the problem, it seems. And you tell me what you think about this. That seems to be the problem. Is that I've never had postpartum. Was I extremely emotional and and behaved ridiculously sometimes after children? 100%. But I didn't have postpartum, and I went back to work 6 days after I had my first one, and I was doing a ton of different things, but I didn't have it. But I think for people who do have that step more, where it is, postpartum, you can just blame it on all this other stuff then that seems to be where it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Because then it goes misdiagnosed for so long. So you're like, oh, I just had a baby. Oh, I'm just emotional. But it is such a dark, dark, dark place. I remember after I had Rafa was born at 35 weeks, 6 days, and he was a solid 6 pounds, 7 ounces. So he was fine in terms of that. But he was born with a cord around his neck, and it was like this very dramatic thing. So he was in the NICU for a few days. Fortunately, I got to stay there with him, because the idea of going home, and I'm sure any of you out there who have had to leave your baby in the NICU, I can't even imagine. But, they came into my room almost every hour and asked me how I was feeling. Do I want to hurt myself? Do I want to hurt my son? And I didn't understand what they were doing. And I was very frustrated by it. I was like, what is wrong with you? I was like, of course I don't. And a woman said to me, she said, postpartum is very, very serious, and I would appreciate if you take it seriously. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I said, I do. I feel okay. And then I changed it, and I realized that they were just checking in on me. And but it's amazing that they were coming in. And for somebody who is separated from their child, that I guess that's a marker of people behaving in different ways.
Yeah.
But, the other thing that I wanted to ask you is, what do you do? So if you've had postpartum for the first time, you figured it out, it went diagnosed, and you sought help, and then are you afraid to have another baby? Are you afraid to feel that way again?
Well, I think it always hovers, but so for the second one, I got a lot of help after Alec, and that's the big thing, is see someone. Don't be afraid of medications. If a doctor says this could take the edge off, this could help you. Everyone has different philosophies, so I'm not pushing something that doesn't work for everyone. Yeah. But if by chance you're open to that and a doctor says you should, don't be afraid of that. I had thought when you got pregnant you needed to be off everything, you shouldn't do anything. Like, I came in with all the things I'd ever learned. With the second one, I spoke with a doctor and said, my doctor, and said, that was rough. I don't want to go through that. And she said, we researched enough with what you're taking now that you'll be able to be pregnant on this. And I would suggest you stay on it, because the very minute risks of anything with a baby are so much less than the stress you cause your baby through hormones when you're struggling.
Right.
And that was a different choice I made for Sandra. So I was more open to someone needs to help me, because I don't know what I'm doing. So you tell me what you think, and then of course bounce it off Max, and he was like, we'll do whatever we have to do. You have to be well first. And I actually loved it. Like, Sandra was a totally different experience. And interestingly, Alec, everyone says little boys love their mamas, Alec is a papa's boy. And there's lingering guilt 3 years later. This is the thing. Postpartum isn't a one size fits all. And there is no out date. So I ran into Brooke Shields at the studio today, and we had a conversation. And I thanked her, because I said, way before people talked about postpartum,
right?
You wrote a book,
yes,
and you were vocal. Now, one of the things that's hard to talk about is the shame you feel as a woman. Like, I'm being sarcastic in case that doesn't come through the mic. We were built to do this. That's what we're for. Like, you do it, and it's natural, and people have done it. All these sayings are pumped into our heads every day of our lives. So when you're not normal, air quotes, you are ashamed, and shame lives in silence, so you don't talk about it. I think it's something that people are becoming more aware and talking about, but Brooke Shields went through this in 2005, I think, or something. So we were talking about it, and we talked about the inner voice, and she said how much sense that voice makes. It's you in your head telling you, you're the only one that is going through this. Never mention it, because people are literally going to freak out about what you're saying. Like, these thoughts are awful. And she was saying, it's so funny how you talk yourself into silence. You talk yourself into doing nothing, and you literally feel alone. So just knowing that now a college friend wrote me right before I had Alec, and I hadn't talked to her in like 10 years, and she wrote me a couple paragraphs, and it was this kind of bleak email that said, I don't know if you'll need this advice, but someone gave this to me, and I think it's our duty to keep passing it on to other moms. And it was this dark couple paragraphs about, we all know that being a mom is joyful and it's a blessing and all this stuff, but what you may not know. And then it goes into 2 paragraphs about the isolation, the darkness, the not feeling like it's a glove that fits, the not knowing what to do, the hopeless, the helpless. And it kept going. And I wasn't shocked by the message because I had been through depression before. But I thought, oh, wow, that could come in handy. I've never forgotten that. I continue to pass it to new moms. And when I meet strangers and I'm like, is this your first? When they say yes, I just give a couple sentences and I say, if when your baby comes, you feel like it's not what you thought it'd be, and you feel super alone and it feels super dark, that's okay. I have come out of the other side of that dark cloud, and it can be amazing. Just know you're not alone. And I'm like, and if you don't need that advice and it's blissful, forget you ever met me. But just in case, I feel the need to tell you that you're not alone. Because it's the biggest thing is, again, even though I know I'm someone that's always felt very comfortable in my skin, that there's always someone else going through something. That was a very isolating feeling. It was probably the most alone I'd ever felt in my entire life. My sisters were better moms. My mom was a kick-ass mom. Every woman around me was just nailing it. Not because they pretended. They were just nailing it. I saw them in their ugly times, and they were still nailing it. So everyone was amazing, and I was broken.
Well, I think it's interesting because I'm the oldest of 4, and so I have 2 sisters who will hopefully eventually have children of their own, and then my brother, who's our baby princeling of the family.
We're the same, by the way, 3 girls and a boy.
Oh, that's funny. Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's what this birth order will be. I will have 3 girls and a boy after this baby's born. And I think it's really funny. And my grandmother, who went on to have 6, had 3 girls and a boy with her first 4. So I think it's very interesting. It's the family schedule. But I'll be very curious to see what they're like as mothers, and I hope that I hope that they will have had an opportunity to see what my experience is like, and have had and hold on to more of it than I held on to watching my aunts be pregnant or other. I didn't have a lot of close girlfriends who'd had kids around the same time that I did. The closest family member I'd had was an aunt who had a baby a couple of years before I had Philo, and I think because I didn't have a lot to compare it to, it felt more isolating, and it felt more. I was listening to you talk about the voice in your head that tells you to keep everything quiet. That was one of the exercises John and I would go through. Is he'd be like, okay, I just want you to say out loud what it is that you're worrying about, or what it is that's like, what's the worst thing that you're thinking, or like the deepest, darkest place that you're going. And even just giving it oxygen, like putting it in so someone else can hear it, or putting it out in the universe, lets you hear what you sound like from another person's perspective. And it gives you such a head break, just like, because you get in this dark cycle. It's worry. I mean, I talk about this all the time. I feel like worry is just a prayer for the worst possible outcome. And there are many of us who are just so prone to worry about everything. And anytime someone doesn't answer their phone, it's because it's like they were in a horrible car accident, like the whole thing, the whole thing. But it was so interesting making it come to the surface, giving it oxygen, it is the opposite of fueling the fire. It puts it out, actually, and it lets you get a grasp on it. And I hope for my sisters that I've been open enough with them about the fact that all of the wonderful stuff, and I don't want to diminish that. I want to show them that, but show them that it comes with lots of struggle and lots of failure and lots of like, this is not what I thought was going to happen. And you're a very self-deprecating person. And I have no doubt that your sisters are going to listen to this and be like, no, Sara has it so much better than we did. And she like is doing so many things better than we did. Because everyone does ultimately have their one little thing or their couple little things that they find harder than anything else. But I that's why part of why I think and continue to think Mom Brain is so valuable is because people don't. You're right. It's harder to say these things to people who you're really close with. It's harder to talk about these things when they're so personal. It's nice to hear them, though. It's nice to feel like there is this community of people, and so many of these experiences are common and universal in a way.
I think that's why, we are living in a very special time right now where these things are becoming more present. I mean, I don't know when this episode is going to air, but a few days ago, I just said that I'm probably experiencing a miscarriage right now. And I had a feeling before being pregnant. This time I said, you know what, if I ever get pregnant again, I'm just going to tell people right away because I hate being quiet about it. And I get very frustrated with having to change my wardrobe because my body changes right away because I have a million children. And that's like the first thing that all of a sudden your belly's like, okay, we're doing this again before you can take a positive test. And it just, especially living such a public life, everybody's always trying to search for the secrets, and it's really, really exhausting. And so I, against what everybody basically, except for my husband, told me, I decided to be open about it. And it's been an incredibly overwhelmingly positive response because so many people go through it, and just with postpartum, how common it is. And the more that we're quiet about these things, and the more that we're embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed. I wrote that in my post. I'm not embarrassed. I don't have any shame about this. It's not my fault. Yeah. And so many times we think when these things happen to us, whether it's postpartum or loss or all this other stuff that comes with being a parent, we think it's our fault. And we suffer in silence, and then we're not strong enough at home. Yeah. We can go to work and we can be shiny. Yeah. We can go and, on Instagram and post and choose a photo and make it seem really great. But, then we go home, we close the door, and it can be very, very dark.
Well, I never answered your question, though, about your friends who have had postpartum that decide not to have kids. So, I don't know when this will air either, but there was an article on BuzzFeed, and it said, it was talking about when people knew they were done having kids. And, a BuzzFeed roundup is usually hilarious and relatable,
Yes.
And so I love a little roundup. I checked out the thing and I read, it was 19, I think. I went through and I didn't feel the same hilarity that I had with most roundups. And I'm reading it and I'm like, why is this not that funny? And I realized about half of them kind of scream postpartum, probably unknowingly.
Oh, interesting.
And
because the teenager who rounded them up didn't know what they were rounding up.
Yeah, it was like a little morbid. It was like, let me know when I should laugh. But
cue applause.
There was one that it was obvious. It starts out strong. There are two kids. A woman said, I was in the grocery store. I saw two kids in a shopping cart fighting over I'm not touching you. And I thought, not going back into that stage. That's funny. Another woman wrote, when my two twins, I always wanted three, but when I had twins and they both decided they could reach inside their diaper and write on each other with poop, I realized I'm out. But then it was like the next, I don't know how many would say, I came home and didn't feel like a mom should. And I didn't know what I was doing. So I decided not to. And all of a sudden I'm reading that, and then I'm reading the next one, and then I'm reading the next one. And my heart just quivered out of a little bit of like a trigger, but also a sadness for them that they were making decisions, like maybe your friends, based on a period where you're not rational, where you're not okay and you're not well. That's like deciding whether you want to run a marathon while you have a broken foot. Why would I go run a marathon with a broken foot? You can't make a clear decision. And I think that's the thing that jumped out at me is these people, the deeper sadness was I came back. I jumped back in the ring. I had more fear of an only child. Nothing against only children. You got siblings? Okay, thank God. Sorry, I was judging.
Cal nodded affirmatively.
Cal's Egyptian. He's like, Cal's
like, no, we have many. So I was more scared of like the only child's thing as one of many than I was of postpartum, and it was totally different. Every joy that people described, I felt with Sandra. And now Sandra's a mama's nugget. Like, she is so up in my business, and Max always laughs that she's the anti-Alec. Alec runs to Papa for everything, and I do think there is a part of that that's the price I pay for those early years when Max was all hands on deck. he was there. But Sandra is my little baby monkey that just wants to be with me all the time. And I don't feel bad that she doesn't reach for Papa.
By the way, it might not be you. It might just be how Alec is hardwired.
And it really could
or
be.
his phase, by the way.
Or his phase, totally.
He's what, 3?
3.
He's only 3. I mean, at 3, I think also they go through a phase where they start understanding their gender.
Yeah.
A bit more.
They're peanuts.
They're peanuts.
Wait, sorry, I told that off air. I'm referring to something.
We walked, as she came in here, we immediately started talking about penises and vaginas.
And how we need to empower him to say it. But Alec heard penis as peanuts. So he knows he has peanuts now, and that's...
And I was saying that Rafa, my first son, says magina, although he has learned penis recently, and we're very into penis. But yeah, I liked magina for a while, like a mangina. But yeah, no, but and it's
they do go through phases.
They go through phases, and I hope, I know we don't know each other that well, but I hope that you don't think that you have to do penance for it. I hope that you don't feel like you've done something that's irreparable.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Brooke says, it was funny in the conversation, I said, I know that I have to self-talk then, like, let it go. Like, this is okay. And she said, Sarah, my kids are 15 and 13, and I still, with my first, sometimes go there. It's a lingering,
But our first, I think, gets our worst selves and our best selves, right? They get you at your most vulnerable, at your least experienced. Parenting is not, my mother-in-law loves to say, doesn't come with a book of instructions. You are flying by the seat of your pants in a diaper, looking for a way
literally in a diaper,
looking for how to make sense of the whole new world that you've been put into. And at the same time, they're the only ones who will ever have you alone. They're the only ones who will ever have you at your most eager and like wanting to please and wanting to give them all of yourself. And I think there's all those studies that show that firstborns come out really well. So
I've heard, Daphne, you're a firstborn, right?
Sure am.
Turned out great.
Wait, Laurie, are you the youngest or the
The
oldest?
youngest.
Okay,
We're
okay.
super close. We're like a year and a half apart.
And I'm the third girl before the boy.
Interesting. Okay, so you're the baby girl.
I'm the baby girl.
Yeah.
And my parent and my mom, Joe was an accident. It was a Baldwin. Like they had him like on top of each. Like my mom, I said, the math isn't adding up for your breastfeeding. And she was like, I swear we took every precaution. I'm like, I don't want to know. But my brother is literally 14 months younger than me.
Yep, that's
a Baldwin baby.
Those are my 2 middle ones.
Yeah.
I have to say, when I found out I was pregnant with my third when my son was 6 months old, I just sat down and cried and cried and cried. 5 minutes later, I was like, okay, great. I have to have another baby. But there was that moment of like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But they turn out so nicely. And then I look at Leo and I'm like, can you imagine the world with no Leo? We need to have him. He is definitely...
once they have little faces and you're like, I mean, look at my work.
Yes.
Look what I did.
My work speaks for
I created fire.
I'm Maui.
That's the best part, though, of sharing the journey with a partner, whoever that is, because someone once said before you have kids, you'll look at your partner differently because the only other person that loves a human being as much as you, the only one that rivals you, is your partner who also made them. It's very, it's nepotism, it's narcissism, but we stare at our kids and we sit there and we're like, perfection. Like they're not perfect kids. They're all kinds of crazy. But you look at them and you're like, that nose. I couldn't have drawn it better if I had created it in a computer. Like this is perfect. We just stare and we just kavitz. I don't even know if that's the right word. I'm not Jewish, but it's like we just like dwell on them and just drop love bombs on them. We're like, they're so great.
But that's important. You got, and you know what? It's nice to have someone who sees only the glory like you see, and also to laugh with. I feel like there are so many little moments like that are just freaking nuts. And to have someone who's like, oh no, that's funny. That's some funny shit. I would have done that too.
Yes.
That's like...
Or to look at each other when it gets really wacky because we're in the heart of toddlerdom. And Alec, we don't know with him being our first, because your oldest, Carmen's 5.
5 also.
5.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys have seen the other side. For us, we don't know where Alec ends and toddler begins. And so we look at him and we'll both be like, I sure hope this is a passing phase. Because
3 is hard.
They'll tell you like little mean statements. Like, Alec doesn't want me to make noise when I taste his food, so he'll cook for me. He'll put it in my mouth, and your natural reaction is,
Yeah.
no, mama, no sounds. And so then he comes back, and I
He doesn't
taste
want
it
false
again.
praise.
Yeah. Then he clearly is a perfectionist. But then he'll give me food, and I'll say, I'm like, what else do I say? I'm like, thank you. I was hungry. No, those are sounds. Then he leaves again. Finally, he comes back, and I just stare at him awkwardly and do nothing. And he goes, good, mama. No
training
sounds.
you.
And I'm like, what a little a-hole. Like, he's like a little bossy brat.
No, I think 3 so far has been the most difficult age for us. They're very, very difficult because they're not babies anymore. And 2, and so they say things that really cut you. Mama used to say, Mommy, you don't like me, you don't love me, and you do not want to be my friend. Always, like it was like this thing that she would just spew off whenever she was angry with
Alec
me.
told me he was going to go find a new mama.
Yep,
I was
yep.
like, good luck. Your dad's tough, and you're going to have to make sure she likes him too.
You know what? But going back to what you were talking about before, another thing that I think that your children are extremely lucky for is that you're doing self-work and you're being so open about it. Like, how many times do people have parents that just pretend like they're perfect all the time? They're just going to fake it and fake it and fake it and fake it. And to be open and to be vulnerable and be like, one of my things that I always try to do with my kids is to say, hey, you know what? Mommy was wrong and I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry is big.
Big, because then they are more likely to do it as well, and even if it's about something silly, like literally something so silly that normally I would just ignore, I sit them down, I'm like, Mommy really shouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, I think that's a huge thing. And I don't know if that's generational parent to parent. My parents weren't big I'm sorry people. And I had an incident the other day with Alec where he wanted to smear the Aquaphor everywhere. He wants to put it on his lips, but that means everywhere. And so I had taken it away. He got mad. And it was actually a moment Max stopped, observed, and he said, that was a really good mommy moment, Sarah. And I was like, really? Aww. I did it? Because I sat down and he came back and his little lip is bubbling. And he's like, Mama, I just wanted to do. And I said, you know what, Alec, I'm sorry. I didn't know that's what you wanted to do. It's just typically that gets really messy and Mama didn't want to mess. And he's like, I just wanted it. And I was like, that's okay. We can go get it and we'll do it again. And he's like, okay, Mama. And I was like, I didn't notice it was happening. And I stand up and Max is just staring at me like in those rom-coms. Like I could almost hear the music. And I was like, you love me, don't you? He's like, no, that was just such a cute mommy moment. I was like, thank you. I did it. I had a mommy moment.
So cute. No, but that self-awareness is like, I do think it's generational. I don't think that I don't think that people were as comfortable talking about their own emotions, much less their experience of parenting in the way that shifted their emotions. So I think that our kids are definitely reaping the benefits of us being willing to say, and maybe that's why I'm so terrible at saying I'm sorry.
Are you terrible at saying I'm sorry? Wait, to everyone or to...
Now I'm much better, but as a kid, it would be like a standoff of the wills.
Oh,
like,
well, as a kid, I
apologize.
I didn't utter those words. I just learned the word 2 years ago.
Exactly. But exactly that. Like parenting has made me much better at it because I want to model it for my kids, and because I want them to see that it's, if you hurt someone, or even accidentally, it's important to let them know that you see them, that you recognize that in them, and that you can empathize with that, and that you feel badly for it. Still working.
Accidents You're doing so well. Do you want to say the words I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. Look at that. No. But I do think, look, I also think that it's just talking about modeling our behavior for our kids for a second. I think that our kids are growing up in a world where they're having and in the same way that they'll have more of us and more of ourselves to access, they're also accessing lots of other people. And I think that they have, it's really important to sort of set those standards of like, here's how, we talked about this earlier today, here's how our family functions, here's how our family deals with whatever. And like our family looks different than other families, and mommy's home sometimes and not home other times, or I'm really good at some things, I'm not really good at other things. And I think being open about our shortcomings and also praising of ourselves and the things that we do really well is so important, so that our kids start to learn that and are able to use that as a filter of like how to just make. I think about this all the time about how our kids are going to make sense of their universe and how different it is than how when we grew up in the 80s, and it's just a completely different time. And I think when I think about making my kids resilient, and adaptable and confident. So much of that starts from an emotional awareness. And so I think that that's something that like you are representing in such an important way for your kids, whether you think you're failing every day or having successes like the Aquaphor incident. Like you have to praise yourself because it is so impressive and important that you're giving your kids access to yourself in that really deep way.
Thank you.
Cool. It's really cool.
It all goes to being real.
Yeah.
The more real we can make it, I think the better that they're going to be. You know, on a bit of a lighter subject and 3-year-olds. So Rafa's really interested in accidents, and it was just an accident. Like he'll literally like slug Leo and be like, "It was just an accident. I didn't mean to." And he then talk about mess. He took my lipstick the other day and drew all over my wallpaper.
No.
Like not even just a wall.
No.
Oh. And then he goes, "Oops, Mommy, it was just an accident. I didn't mean to." I'm like, "So you didn't mean to when you went and found the lipstick, opened the lipstick up, rolled it out, and then started to draw on the wallpaper. Just an accident." But what I didn't do was yell, which
I'm working on that.
I thought I was going to because it was very upsetting. So he helped me clean it up.
I read this really cool post. Again, I learn everything on Facebook. It was about Inuit tribes and how they raise their kids. And one of the things it said is, this isn't a statement on discipline, but there's never a need to raise your voice with a child. Now, of course, if they're crossing the street,
Danger.
or they're putting their hand on the stove. But the point was, you can discipline with the same efficacy, and actually probably more so, when you never raise your voice, because our internal ego, when we raise our voice, is reacting as an adult to almost an intentional wrongdoing. Kids are so often not doing that. So you're reacting on a different level than they have. Calmly saying the same words and telling them and never losing your control shows them how to handle anger better. And I was like, oh, why did my mind just get blown? Because I always go to screaming because my mom was a screamer. So I jump there with Max. I jump there with the kids. And now Max and I will both look at each other and like, "Did you see that? I didn't scream." Like, you can hear it. Like if
Oh, it's way scarier when you're not screaming. You're like,
well, and I
"This
can
is
feel myself getting, because the new thing Alec does is Sandra is a wobbly little walker, and he grabs her shirt and he just pulls her back and she just like falls backwards. And I'm like, "Alec, what happened?" He's like, "I pushed her down." And I'm like, "Alec!" Like, and so you start to grab him or go towards him, and then I'm like, calm, use your words, articulate, go slowly. And so I'm like, it's my new personal growth moment. I want to do the same messaging without any of the volume. I don't want him to see my anger.
Right. And it's difficult. But once you start to practice it, and I don't do it 100%, I always say to them, "When does Mommy yell?" And they say, "Mommy yells when there's danger." And that actually might be danger when they're hurting each other too, because especially with so many boys.
I have a loose definition of danger, so...
Well, I mean, I also have boys that are 14 months apart and that will literally draw blood sometimes. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then they're like hugging each other and like reading a story together, and then they're like, literally one of them bit the other one on the lip, and there's like blood. "Mommy, it was just an accident. Didn't mean to." Same thing over and over again. But you know, the more that I can stick with that, then it just makes me all powerful.
Yeah.
Because they take
You're like a Buddha.
Well, I don't know about that. But then they take this serious. When I am really yelling at them, they
know the difference.
They know that there's danger, and they look at it differently. Whereas if I'm yelling all the time, they're just going to be like, look at me like, "Okay, Mommy, whatever."
That's so important, though, to have that gradient of like, this is serious, this is less serious. Because I do think we escalate really quickly in our house. It's like 0 to 60, and it's I think it will be. You said something like when we first started getting to hang out and stuff. You'd said something like, "I always think about if I was evaluating this behavior a week from now, how would I respond?" Out of the heat of the moment, removing myself emotionally from the frustration of like, "Why are you fighting again?" or whatever it is. How would I respond? And would I be proud of how I responded?
Yes.
And I think that that's just giving yourself, it's like, giving yourself a 30-second rule before you eat something you don't necessarily want to eat.
But it's also, my kids call me out on it as well.
Oh, really?
So if I don't do it, then Carmen one time said to me, I was frustrated about her, and it wasn't even yelling at her, I was just being rude.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Mommy, why are you talking to me that way?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry. And she checked me.
Alec looks and he's like, "Mommy, don't yell." And sometimes I'm not yelling, but he can sense the intensity
about
that
to come.
I'm fighting it off. But I look at him and I'm like, "We don't." And I was like, you have to remember, Alec, you're making choices. And sometimes you're not going to like my answer. But that doesn't mean mommy's yelling.
Yes.
Right.
Don't try to trick me,
Yes.
kid. Mommy's self-growth moment is working. Okay.
But look, I also think it's important that they see that you're a human and that you're going to have we've had a bunch of cousins and family in over the last couple of weeks, and they are all staying at my grandparents' house, and we obviously live down the road, and I had to take Philomena home at some point. This is a girl who would never come home. If I would just leave her with my grandparents and her great grandparents and her sibling and her cousins, I'm sorry, she would just, see you later kind of situation. And she gets in the car and I am so mad at you. She's like the most emotionally, she's a performer. She's Pisces.
I love her.
A lot of
that's
performance.
Alex a Pisces.
Oh, okay. Well, then you're in for a real treat.
Yay.
They're so sweet and like wonderful, but they get very emotionally heated and heightened. But in any case, I said to her, I was like, it's okay. You're allowed to be upset. I still have to take you home because you have to like sleep at home at some point this week. And I had reasons for it, and I do try to share my reasons. So I'm not this arbitrary tyrant in their life. I have rules that I try to stick with. I try to be consistent for them, and I try to be honest with them when if I know that I'm on a short fuse, I've had a frustrating day, or I just got home from the airport, like whatever it is, I have some reason that I'm not in my normal state of mind, I'll say mommy's really cranky today, like I'm so sorry, and just so that they recognize that, because I think again going back to the emotional register, I think kids are aware of these things, they just don't know how to put words to them, and they feel it before they can interpret it, and so I always try to just preempt it.
Well,
and
it creates a
myself
self-awareness because by you saying, mommy sometimes has days where she's cranky, then when they feel it, maybe they can wrap their words around it and say, I'm cranky.
And to not know why either. I mean, you point out, I dropped something, and I always hate when I get mad if I drop something. You know, when like everything seems to be like going wrong. What is it, Murphy's Law? And Carmen's like, I didn't do it. And I said, I'm not mad at you right now. And she's like, who are you mad at? And I'm like, the toothpaste. And it's one of those things I was like, you know what? Sometimes you just feel funny and everything's bothering you. I mean, now everybody knows I was pregnant at the time. So I was like super, super emotional. And like just everything just seemed to be like, bumping into everything. And I can't tell her that because obviously her with this information, it's like, she's not ready for that kind of thing. This idea of like, well, that's my sibling and my sibling died. And that's not appropriate.
Age appropriate,
not appropriate. But yeah, no, to be able to, separate. And they'll say to me sometimes, like, Mommy, I don't feel good and I don't know why. Yeah. And going back to what you're talking about, giving them these tools to kind of, navigate their emotions from when they're really little is so important. It's such a gift.
Yeah. And teaching them how to take care of themselves in some, as much as possible at age appropriate stages emotionally, which brings me to something we love to talk about on the show, which is me time. So what is your go-to relaxation or thing that you do just for yourself, or things that you'll let someone else do for you that just like relax you to the bone?
Well, massage is like huge for me. I also love yoga when there's a moto yoga, which is like a hot, I love it. And whenever I go, I dragged Max. He had never really done yoga. And I was like, he loves meditation. I'm like, those two are like intertwined. But we went and he said, that is mind blowing. My whole morale changes when I do yoga. I've been bad about it. I knew you can do it all the way through pregnancy. I haven't been great about getting the time out of the house to go do it. Yeah. But this hot yoga, it's not hot yoga, but it's a warmer yoga.
It's a warmer yoga. It's like in the, I think Balmy. It's in the 90s.
Yes. So it's not like the crazy Bikram. It's just toasty. You're going to sweat a little. It's like Florida yoga. But then that or massage, I'll go sit. There's a little place right across the street. And I typically love to do like any research I'm doing for work, which research is really fun, really, because it's like books and articles that I have to read. And I'm like, oh, unfortunately, I've got to read BuzzFeed. So I sit there and I get the best foot massages and I just sit there. And Max, I swear though, Max, he's never said anything, but he's got to be judging me because almost every day you want to utilize the time while you have childcare until you get home because I don't want to be on my phone when I get home and I don't want to be reading other things. I want to be present. So I take every minute and I'm like, do I have any other calls I have to make? Do I have anything else to do? And so I'll sit there and he's like, where are you? And I know I'm doing homework, but I swear I'm almost embarrassed to say I'm across the street again. I'm doing my research, and like it's my husband, and I know he doesn't care, but I still like feel a little judged.
See, I think you should feel super amazing because you're multitasking. You're like,
I mean, yeah, I'm receiving the pleasure.
Two things at once.
I think it's excellent. I'm a big believer in 100% on when I'm at work or doing whatever, and then 100% mom when I get home. And that reasoning that with myself has allowed me to get rid of a lot of the mom guilt that I used to carry around, feeling like I should be home when I was at work and like I was missing work stuff when I was at home. So I think that is just the perfect balance to strike.
I'm going to start texting you guys. I'm across the street. You know what that means.
Well, this is making me feel better because Alec is always like, there's like there's a person between you and me right now. I'm feeling awkward about it. Do you think the baby can hear anything? I'm like, no.
Oh, I love how men never get over that. Do you think they know?
What, that you're knocking on their front door? Like, what are we talking about?
But the funny thing is, Max cared more the first time. He was like, you know how like they're like, I don't know what to do with this and like what's happening. And I'm like, dude, do you really think if you were not like you were hitting the baby that they would advise to do this? But then it's funny because like the second time he was like, I know the math. You're gonna have a baby 6 weeks until you have your postpartum. Then you're breastfeeding, which turns these off completely. So everything changes. I think I'll just tap in now.
Yeah, I just gotta get this situation
I'm just gonna close my eyes and not worry about it.
See, no, with the breastfeeding thing, that's where my husband goes crazy because all of a sudden I have like a size like Z. Does that exist?
Yeah, but the universe's joke on men is the more desirable you become, the more you're like, get away from me.
But you know what?
And these are working teats right now, so don't you dare touch them with your hands.
Like, you just spray them.
Oh my God. Shockingly, that's not a turnoff, by the way. Just saying. They're not like cats or dogs. You're like, don't scratch. Shoot, now I totally forgot. I was thinking about you guys.
We just interrupted her brilliance with a breast milk squirt story.
Brilliant idea. Damn it. Whatever. I still think that is the only justice in the universe is that you are totally desirable and totally off limits because all the other painful parts about pregnancy are the woman's to bear. This is their one sacrifice.
You're right. It's the one cross to bear is I want to touch you so bad, but I would never dare do it. I know better.
Oh my gosh. Sarah, you're hilarious. Don't ever leave us.
I know. He keeps on waving to us.
I know. Cal's like,
that's what you're doing. I thought he was like, tell us more breastfeeding stories. They're amazing.
You mentioned like that, not only do. My wife was like, don't flatter yourself. I was like, am I going to hit her in the head?
Exactly.
Don't flatter yourself.
This episode has to be called Don't Flatter Yourself.
Don't flatter yourself, sweetie.
It's hilarious.
Well, thank you so much for having I said for having us. Great mom brain. We're
I know.
genius.
Where are we?
Where can we follow you? How many kids do you have? The whole
the whole shebang.
The whole shebang.
I was doing like so short. Okay, one, my Instagram and Twitter are not as interesting as Alaria's, but
oh my goodness, I'm gonna making me blush today.
You can troll me if you want.
She's gonna start taking her clothes off and doing push-ups in a thong.
I welcome the 14% that Alaria has to my sexy Insta. I'm just my name at Sara Haines. I have Alec, who's 3 years old, not named after Alaria's husband. Sandra, who turned 1 in December. And then I have this little one, who I know is a little boy, but we don't have a name yet. And he is due July 3rd. And Alaria just told me that I could go late on my 3rd. Thanks.
Anything is possible.
Thank you as you set me off into the night.
But it's going to be great. It's going to be great.